Alright, so if you're watching this video, this means you're either really good at algebra, you find algebra easy, or you already feel like really confident in factoring trinomials. Okay, if this is not you, if you find algebra hard, especially doing it on your own at home, or if factoring was something that was super hard for you, then go back to Canvas and click on the other video. It's the same notes, to be honest. It's just going to take you step by step. Alright, okay, so what we're doing is we're solving quadratics by factoring. Solve just means find the x-intercepts. So in this example, like, I have a quadratic and I still have two x-intercepts, one at x equals 3 and one at x equals 9. Alright, this first equation, I went ahead and graphed it in Desmos, and it has two x-intercepts, one at x equals -4 and one equals at -2. So pretty much I can just stop right here and just, this is my final answer, okay? Alright, now the thing with these notes is, yes, you will have the final answer. Just go to Desmos and that's it. But you also need to know how to do it by hand. So this is how you would do it by hand. And you need to know how to do it now, because if you don't learn it now, it's going to hurt you in your next math courses up until you graduate high school. And especially if you decide to major in STEM, you need to start mastering this subject now, okay? So here are your 3 steps. First, just make sure it equals to 0, so use inverse operations if it doesn't. Second step is the snowflake method. Remember, all you gotta do is figure out the two numbers that multiply to a times c and add up to b. And then the only thing that we're adding that's new is step 3, which is solve by equaling each factor to 0. Okay, so here's how you do it. Step 1, make sure your equation equals to 0. In this case, it does, so I stop, move on, go to step 2, do snowflake. Alright, so with snowflake, 1 times 8 is 8. Two numbers that multiply to 8 and add up to 6 is 2 and 4. Positive 2 and positive 4. And even though you know they're the right answers, always pause and double check. 2 times 4 is 8, and 2 plus 4, that equals 6. Okay, so my two factors are 1x plus 2 and 1x plus 4. Okay, and you're probably thinking, well, didn't you say the answers were -4 and -2? Well, here's why. Okay, you cannot forget step 3. Step 3 is saying set each factor equal to 0, and here's why. X-intercepts, remember, the y value is always equal to 0. So I need to figure out what x will make this whole equation 0, so I do inverse operations. So my first answer is -2. And my other answer is -4. And that's what I got there. X equals -4 and x equals -2. So this is my final answer. I can answer the quiz question now. If the quiz asks me what are the roots or x-intercepts or what are the zeros, I just say those are my two answers. Also notice they're two completely different numbers, so you have two solutions. On the quiz, your assignment, it may ask you how many solutions you have. Okay, if you get two different numbers, you have two solutions. Alright, here's another example. Very similar. Step 1, okay, e equals to 0, I'm good. Step 2, snowflake. Alright, two numbers that multiply to -5 and add up to -4. I think these work. Let me check. -5 times 1, that equals -5. -5 plus 1, that equals -4. So my two factors are x minus 5 and x plus 1. Remember, you cannot forget step 3. X minus 5 equals 0. X plus 1 equals 0. Solve. So x equals 5. And x equals -1. Okay, also notice how the two numbers that you have to decide will work. Our final answer are just the opposite signs of them, okay? That's why you cannot forget step 3, because they're going to be opposite signs. Alright, so, and those are two different numbers, so I have two solutions. So I have two different x-intercepts. So it's kind of like this first quadratic. You have two different x-intercepts. Touches the x-axis twice. Alright, so let me give you an example where you have one solution. So step 1, make sure it equals 0. In this case it doesn't, so just do inverse operations. I'm going to subtract 2 because I want that 2 to jump over to that side. And the only way you do that is do inverse. So you have t squared plus 8t plus 16 equals 2 minus 2 is 0. Okay, now I'm good. Now I can do step 2, which is snowflake. Two numbers that multiply to 16 and add up to 8 are 4 and 4. Because 4 times 4 is 16. And positive 4 plus 4 is 8. So my two factors are x plus 4 and x plus 4. Remember, do not forget step 3. X plus 4 equals 0. And x plus 4 equals 0. Do inverse operations, so you get an answer of negative 4 and another answer of negative 4. Okay, these are the exact same numbers, alright? But you don't need to say on the quiz, hey, my answer is x equals negative 4 and x equals negative 4. If it's the same number, just say your answer is negative 4, okay? So this is just one solution, okay? Alright, so here's a different example of just one solution. So that could happen. And here's why it's one solution. If you were to graph this on Desmos, you have your parabola, your vertex, and then your coordinate plane. Okay, notice how the quadratic is touching the x-axis at negative 4, and then it goes up forever and ever. Okay, so here's an example of, hey, your quadratic only touches the x-axis once. So you only have one root. You only have one x-intercept. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and go to the next type of solution. So we have two solutions, which could happen. Now you have an example of what if there's just one solution? You just have one answer. Alright, and now here's a different example. Step 1, make sure it equals 0, and it does, so I move on to step 2. Okay, I'm going to take this one slow because I really want to emphasize if you can't figure it out, just in case, always write out the factors. So 1 times 9 multiplies to 9. 3 times 3, also negative 1 times negative 9 works, and negative 3 times negative 3 works. All these numbers multiply to positive 9. If I go through all of them, none of them will add up to negative 3. Like this adds up to 10. This adds up to 6. This adds up to negative 10. This adds up to negative 6. Okay, these are the only factors and only possible numbers you can use. And if none of them work, then your quadratic is prime, so your final answer is just no solution. You don't have any x-intercepts, okay? So if that happens, just graph it on Desmos just to double check if you are good, if maybe you missed a factor or something. But if I were to graph this graph on Desmos, it would look something like this. That quadratic is never going to touch the x-axis. It will never touch it. So if it never touches the x-axis, you have no roots. You have no solutions. You have no x-intercepts. You have no zeros, okay? So that's another type of a quadratic. So we have 3 types. The first one is no solution. You can't factor it. Another one is you have one solution, so you have one answer. You just see it twice, but it's the same number. And the third example is the normal one. You have 2 different solutions. You have 2 different x-intercepts. You can factor it. Okay. Now, if you come across a word problem, the area of a garden is 96 feet squared. The length of the garden is 4 feet more than the width. And you're lucky they gave you the equation. They're asking what is the width. So if they gave you the equation, it's still the same 3 steps. They also gave me the area, so I'm going to fill that in. So on the quiz, if you get an equation, always go through the same steps. Step 1, make it equal to 0. I need to move that 96 over by inverse operations. 96 minus 96 is 0. W squared plus 4w minus 96. That 96 does not have any like terms. It doesn't have a w. So second step is snowflake. The only two answers that will work is a negative 8 and a positive 12. Negative 8 times 12, that equals to 96. And negative 8 plus 12, that equals to a positive 4. So x minus 8 and x plus 12. Don't forget step 3, equal it to 0. And your final answers are always the opposite. So x equals positive 8 and x equals negative 12. Now, I'm sorry, I always keep doing this. I always go back to x. This should be w's because that's what the equation started off with. It's okay if you go back to x. Just remember they were w's initially. They were widths. Alright, now with word problems, same 3 steps. It's just go back to the word problem. What are they asking for? They're just asking for w. Alright? So, but can width ever be negative? No, it can't. Okay? So in that case, you only have one answer, which you should. The width can only be one width. So the width is 8 feet. And that is it for the notes. So first step, make sure it equals to 0. Second step, snowflake. Third step, equal each factor to 0 and solve. And that is it. That is your final answer.